So, Bessma, as you perhaps heard Natasha there reading part of the statement from the military, part of the reason why they're doing this is essentially, they say, is to restore constitutional order and general security, which they believe has been damaged. Tell us about that perception amongst some people in Turkey.
Well, really what the military is referring to is the fear that Erdogan has consolidated a great deal of power into the presidency. See, the presidency was always meant to be a ceremonial role. The prime minister was where the real power was supposed to happen. And what we've seen Erdogan do in the past few years, and in fact, he's on his way to try and make amendments to the constitution to actually change that very underlying division of power so that the presidency, which is the role that he holds, has more control and takes away from the prime minister. We saw him actually sacking his own prime minister about 2 months ago, a very popular prime minister, partly because he thought maybe that prime minister had too much personality and wanted to get rid of him. So we were seeing, I think, the military reacting to a general sentiment, really, that Erdogan is consolidating a great deal of power. He's becoming a new czar-like figure throughout Turkey. And for the military, that is a great red line, a threat to them. They've already been defanged, I would say, once a few years ago by an attempt to clean out the top ranks of the military. And I think what we're seeing here is a very, very bold move by the military to now put Erdogan in his place.
Well, a bold move, but one would have to assume if they're going to try to do this coup, that the military believes that they could get public support, if not immediately, then soon afterwards. Do you think the public will support the military in this move?
Well, look, it's complicated. As I said, the country is highly polarized. So there will be diehard supporters of Erdogan and the AKP. Again, they are the majority, 52%. If you take the last presidential election as a so-called referendum, that's not insignificant. Yes, a lot of them do come from the countryside. They don't come necessarily from the major cities, and that's problematic. But, that's a big contingency in a country of 80 million or so. That's a lot of people to, frankly, dismiss and put aside and assume that their democratic rights are not relevant. Now, the other thing you hear is, what is it going to do to the economy? Military is assuming that somehow this will be a positive thing for the economy. I would say that's not the case, particularly because Erdogan and many of his cronies are in the high echelons of the economic system. And so it means turbulent times for the economy. I don't think this is going to be nearly as popular, especially when you scratch the surface of moving beyond those major cities, beyond the intellectuals, beyond those urbanites. I think we're going to see a lot of discontent.
I want to read you the second part of the statement, because we're now getting that into our newsroom. Again, this is from the Turkish Armed Forces. And Bessma, listen to this, please, because I'm going to talk to you about it afterwards. But the second part of the statement reads as follows. All international agreements are still valid. We hope that all of our good relationships with all countries will continue. And that does raise the question about not only Turkey, but about the stability of the whole region, Bessma, because Turkey does play an important strategic role. Its geographic placement, the events that are happening all around it right now throughout the Middle East. What does this mean for global security?
Sure. Well, the message really is really to the international partners. And who matters, right? Remember here, Turkey's a member of NATO. That's really key here. We're a member of NATO. It's a collective security principle. So that's a message to to the international partners. It's saying to all of us who are members of NATO that they are not a threat, that they want to work with NATO partners as part of the international agreements. It's also a message to Russia. Russia is a long-standing foe of the Turks, but there has been a warming of relationships. And that is a message to the Russians that, they are willing to work with the Russian government as Erdogan has been warming up to them in the past few months. It's also a message to the Israelis. The Israelis and Turkey do have a long-standing military relationship that has been strained under a very tense political relationship between Erdogan and the current Prime Minister Netanyahu. So it really is a message to all of those parties, I think, quite specifically. And of course, in a time when everybody's looking at Turkey as a transit for hundreds and thousands of refugees, that big deal that it made with the EU worth $4 billion of making sure that refugees do not get into Europe is, of course, something on the minds of every European power right now. What does that mean to our value deal that we made with the Turkish government?
Now, you have been watching Turkey much more closely than many of our audience members at home. As we talk about what's taking place right now in that country, what are you looking forward to, or rather observing in the next few hours as we watch this all unfold in Turkey?
Well, we'll really have to see how this plays out in terms of on the streets. There are some images coming out of Turkish soldiers on the streets. Are we going to see the rank and file of the entire military agree to this coup? Or is this a faction? Usually coups tend to be done from the very top, of course, and the bottom rank tend to comply. But that's not always the case. There have been fractured coups. And if we see the military able to actually get all of its foot soldiers to basically comply with this, that is very problematic. And I don't know if we're going to see a lot of recourse. And of course, Erdogan is probably on the phones with all of his international allies for us all to condemn this, because of course this is not good for democracy. And yet Erdogan is not well liked by the international community because of some of his absurd statements, and more importantly, his dictatorial type of style of governing.